In the year 37 AD, Rome welcomed a new emperor, young, popular, the beloved son of a war hero. They called him their star, but within 4 years, he would become something else entirely, a monster of legend. He would smash the gods, declare war on the sea, humiliate the Senate, and appoint his horse to high office. This is the story of Gaius Julius Caesar Germanicus, the emperor we call Caligula. His reign marks one of history's most shocking transformations, from prince to tyrant, from man to self-proclaimed god. How did this happen? The answer lies not in madness, but in the absolute, unchecked power of the Roman Empire. And it would end, as so many Roman stories do, in betrayal and blood. On January 24th, 41 AD, a conspiracy of the very men sworn to protect him would strike. This is his true story, separating the man from the myth, the emperor from the monster, based on the archaeological evidence and the ancient histories of Suetonius, Tacitus, and Cassius Dio. He was born Gaius Julius Caesar Germanicus in 12 AD. His father was Germanicus, Rome's most beloved general. His mother was Agrippina the Elder, granddaughter of Augustus. He was imperial royalty. As a toddler, he accompanied his father on campaign. The soldiers adored him and made him a miniature uniform, complete with little soldier's boots, caligae in Latin. They fondly called him Caligula, or Little Boots, a nickname that would haunt him. But his childhood paradise was shattered. In 19 AD, his father Germanicus died suddenly in Antioch. The Roman people were convulsed with grief. Whispers spread that he had been poisoned on the orders of the jealous Emperor Tiberius. With his dying breath, Germanicus accused Gnaeus Calpurnius Piso, the governor of Syria, of acting on Tiberius's orders. The subsequent trial and Piso's mysterious suicide only fueled the rumors. For young Caligula, it was a brutal lesson. In imperial politics, your family could be murdered from the very top. The family returned to Rome for a funeral of unprecedented public mourning. The people's love for Germanicus turned to fury at Tiberius. Caligula watched as his father was deified. He learned another lesson. The public's love was a potent weapon. Fearing the popularity of Germanicus's family, the paranoid Emperor Tiberius turned on them. Caligula's mother and brothers were arrested and exiled, dying in prison. Only Caligula, the youngest, was spared. Tiberius brought the 17-year-old Caligula to his isolated palace on Capri. Here, Caligula lived for 6 years as a hostage in golden captivity. He was surrounded by luxury, intrigue, and Tiberius's legendary depravity. Survival meant mastering deception. The historian Philo wrote that Caligula became an excellent slave during these years. He learned to hide every emotion, to flatter, to anticipate the emperor's whims. It was a masterclass in survival under a tyrant. The historian Philo wrote that Caligula became an excellent slave during these years. He learned to hide every emotion, to flatter, to anticipate the emperor's whims. It was a masterclass in survival under a tyrant. With the support of the powerful Praetorian prefect Macro, Caligula was presented to the guard. They hailed him as emperor. The Senate, with little choice, confirmed it. Rome exploded in joy. The Romans saw in him everything Tiberius was not: young, charismatic, and the biological son of the divine Germanicus. He was their savior. He paid a generous donative to the army and people, cancelled unfair taxes, and recalled political exiles. In a stunning act of clemency, he publicly burned Tiberius's secret treason files, declaring the reign of fear was over. The Senate was overjoyed. The historian Philo recorded, "The whole human race rejoiced." He recovered the bones of his mother and brother from their island prisons and gave them proper, honorable burial. He was dutiful, pious, and generous. The first 7 months of his reign were, by all accounts, nearly perfect. He was so loved that the Senate renamed months in his family's honor. The future looked golden. But then, in October of 37 AD, everything changed. The emperor was struck by a sudden, severe illness. Modern historians speculate it may have been encephalitis, a brain fever, or perhaps the onset of epilepsy. He hovered near death for weeks. The illness was traumatic and profound. When he finally recovered, the young, benevolent emperor was gone. In his place was a different man, paranoid, cruel, and convinced of his own divine nature. His first targets were those closest to power. His supporter Macro was forced to commit suicide. His young cousin and co-heir, Tiberius Gemellus, was accused of plotting and executed. The message was clear: no one was safe. The historian Suetonius claims the illness left him a different man. He began exhibiting what we might now call symptoms of psychosis: insomnia, wandering the palace at night, and a growing obsession with his own divinity. He began appearing in public dressed as various gods: Jupiter, Neptune, Hercules, even as a goddess like Venus or Diana. He was no longer the first citizen, princeps, but a living god walking among mortals. He sent agents across the empire to decapitate the most famous cult statues of the gods and replace them with his own likeness. To worship Jupiter was now to worship Caligula. The Roman elite were horrified, but silent. He converted the ancient temple of Castor and Pollux in the Forum into a vestibule for his own palace, installing a life-sized golden statue of himself. Senators were forced to come and worship it as a condition of keeping their rank. His cruelty was often theatrical. He would summon senior senators in the middle of the night, forcing them to run for miles beside his litter. He was testing their loyalty and demonstrating their complete subservience. At a state banquet, he famously fell into a fit of laughter. When the consul beside him asked what was funny, Caligula replied, "Nothing. But I was just thinking that with one single nod of my head, I could have both your throats cut." The room fell silent. At the games, watching the execution of criminals by beasts, he complained the supply of condemned men was too low. He then ordered the guards to seize a section of the crowd to use up the meat. No one was safe from his arbitrary whims. In 39 AD, perhaps seeking the military glory of his father, Caligula launched a major campaign north. He marched to the Rhine with multiple legions, intent on invading Germania and possibly even Britannia. This was serious, costly military mobilization. He went beyond impersonation. He declared himself the living incarnation of Jupiter Latiaris, the most ancient Italic form of the King of Gods. He personally performed sacrifices in this role, merging the office of Pontifex Maximus with the deity himself. He commanded a temple be built specifically for worship of his own divinity right on the Palatine Hill. He appointed his own priesthood, forcing wealthy senators to pay enormous sums for the honor of serving as his priests. His daily life became a continuous performance of divinity. At banquets, he sat on a golden throne among statues of the Capitoline Triad. He ate from solid gold plates, declaring that only gods should use such vessels. He began holding daily audiences as a god. Petitioners had to perform full prostration, proskynesis, then address him as Jupiter Optimus Maximus. His casual decisions on legal matters were recorded and treated as binding divine oracles. When a Jewish delegation from Alexandria came to plead for their rights, he kept the respected philosopher Philo waiting for weeks. When finally received, Caligula rushed past, mocking them about dietary laws, showing contempt for non-Greco-Roman religions. When his beloved sister Drusilla died in 38 AD, he was devastated. He had the Senate declare her a goddess, Diva Drusilla, the first Roman woman deified in her own right. Temples were ordered, and a priesthood of 20 members established for her cult. His grief turned tyrannical. He decreed a period of public mourning so strict that bathing, dining with family, and even laughter were forbidden. Violators were severely punished. Rome became a city of forced sorrow. He co-opted ancient mystery cult rituals for his worship. He revived the bloody Taurobolium, where initiates were baptized in bull's blood. But now the ritual was performed for priests of his own divinity, a shocking blend of imperial cult and barbaric rite. His religious syncretism knew no bounds. He enthusiastically adopted the Egyptian cult of Isis, appearing as her high priest. To Romans, this Eastern religion was suspicious and un-Roman, further alienating the traditional aristocracy. In perhaps his most famous act of extravagance, he ordered every merchant ship from the region to be lashed together to form a floating bridge across the Bay of Baiae. He then spent 2 days riding back and forth across it in the armor of Alexander the Great, declaring he had conquered the sea god Neptune. Reaching the Channel, the planned invasion of Britain faltered. Instead, he ordered his army to form a battle line against the sea. The artillery fired at the waves. Then he commanded the soldiers to collect seashells as plunder from Neptune. It was either supreme madness or a calculated insult to the army. He built a lighthouse to commemorate this conquest and ordered the shells sent to Rome as trophies. The soldiers who had expected real plunder were given a miserly bonus. The episode severely damaged his relationship with the military. Throughout the campaign, his behavior grew more erratic. He processed through provincial cities in the chariot of Jupiter, wearing Alexander the Great's armor, or a replica, forcing populations to worship him as Invictus, the unconquered. With no real enemy to fight, he staged elaborate fake victories. He used Germanic prisoners to play the role of enemy tribes, who were then defeated by his own bodyguards in carefully choreographed battles. The campaign's real purpose may have been political. Upon arrival in Germania, he suddenly arrested and executed the powerful commander of the Upper Rhine legions, Gaius Julius, accusing him of plotting with Caligula's own brother-in-law. The alleged conspiracy implicated his sisters, Agrippina and Livilla, and his close friend Lepidus. He had them exiled and Lepidus executed. He reportedly had incestuous relationships with these sisters and now turned on them viciously. He then auctioned their luxurious possessions in Rome. He forced attending senators to bid, pointing at them and setting outrageous prices. It was both a humiliation and a direct transfer of wealth from the aristocracy to the imperial coffers. Modern analysis suggests the German campaign wasn't entirely a joke. He may have been rooting out a real conspiracy led by Gaius Julius. He also conducted serious military inspections, managed logistics, and strengthened frontier forts, actions of a competent commander. He returned to Rome in 40 AD. The Senate refused him a full triumph for his non-victories. He accepted a lesser ovation, but the rift with the senatorial class was now permanent and dangerous. Back home, he embarked on colossal building projects, extending the imperial palace to swallow up public space and beginning a new circus. The treasury, refilled by confiscations, was being poured into concrete monuments to himself. He completed and dedicated the temple of the deified Augustus, a pious act, but he ensured his own cult was intertwined, placing his statue inside. He was merging his worship with the state religion itself. After another illness scare, he declared that he would not just be deified after death, but was already a god in mortal form. He ordered a dedicated priesthood and temple for his cult, with the richest citizens forced to serve as his priests at their own expense. Needing more money, he lured his cousin, King Ptolemy of Mauritania, to Rome. After showering him with honors, Caligula suddenly had him arrested, executed, and annexed his wealthy North African kingdom. It was a shocking breach of trust with client states. The financial squeeze continued. He revived Tiberius's treason laws, encouraging informers. Men were accused of disrespect, not sacrificing to his godhead, or speaking ill of him. The penalty was death and confiscation of their entire estate. He threatened to make his favorite horse, Incitatus, a consul, the Republic's highest office. While likely a joke designed to humiliate the Senate, he did give the horse a marble stable, an ivory manger, purple blankets, and even assigned it a household of servants. His humiliations grew more creative. He converted parts of the palace into brothels, staffing them with the wives of senators and equestrians. He opened a gambling den, forcing the elite to play, and extending them ruinous lines of credit which he later called in. His most famous extravagances were his pleasure barges on Lake Nemi. These were floating palaces with marble floors, heated baths, vineyards, and bronze plumbing. They were technological marvels, built solely for his amusement. Suetonius records increasingly sadistic executions. Victims were slowly sawn in half. He forced a father to attend his son's execution, then invited the father to dinner the same evening, demanding cheerfulness. His divine impersonations knew no gender. He appeared as the goddess Venus, wearing a wig and women's clothing, demanding to be worshipped as both Optimus Maximus and Panthea, all gods combined in one. His demand for worship nearly caused rebellion in the empire. He ordered his statue erected in the Holy of Holies, in Jerusalem, the most sacred site in Judaism. Only the desperate diplomacy of his friend King Herod Agrippa delayed this act of cultural annihilation. Beyond the consulship joke, he made Incitatus a priest in his own cult, building the horse a marble stable with an ivory manger and a staff of servants to entertain it with parties when it couldn't sleep. He commissioned uselessly grandiose engineering projects. He ordered a 3-mile tunnel through a mountain near Naples, simply to shorten a road by a few miles. Countless slaves died in its construction. His spending was unsustainable. When the treasury was empty again, he resorted to voluntary donations from the people, which were anything but. Citizens were forced to bequeath their estates to him or face charges. He openly auctioned provincial governorships, priesthoods, and even army commands. The Roman political career, once based on merit and lineage, became a simple commodity for the richest bidder. He seized the fine horses and carriages of the wealthy for his own transport system. If the owner needed their property back for a funeral or wedding, they had to pay an exorbitant rental fee to the imperial treasury. He instituted taxes on everything: food sold in markets, porters' wages, and even prostitutes' earnings. When criticized, he quoted a line from a play: "Let them hate me, so long as they fear me." Finally, he resorted to debasing the currency, reducing the silver content in the denarius. This hidden tax eroded the savings of every Roman and caused price inflation, hitting the poor the hardest. To connect himself to history's great conquerors, he reportedly had Alexander the Great's tomb in Alexandria opened. He took the breastplate for himself and may have even worn the great king's relics, an act considered profoundly impious. His most effective extortion was forcing the rich to name him as heir in their wills. Many then conveniently died soon after. If they changed their will to include him and then survived, he'd prosecute them for waiting too long to die. His wild spending bankrupted the vast treasury Tiberius had left. To refill it, he revived treason trials, confiscated estates, and forced the wealthy to name him as their heir. Then had them executed. He auctioned gladiators and palace furniture at absurd prices, forcing senators to buy. He renewed the order for his statue in Jerusalem, commanding the governor of Syria, Petronius, to carry it out by force. Petronius, knowing it meant war with the Jews, delayed, writing desperate letters to Rome pleading for time. His final catastrophic provocation, he announced he would leave Rome permanently and rule from Alexandria as an absolute god-king, like the Ptolemies. To the Senate, this meant the end of Rome as the imperial center and their own relevance. He began preparing for the move, crating up art and treasure. The Praetorian Guard, whose power base was Rome, realized they might be disbanded or left behind. This turned the protectors of the emperor into potential enemies. The conspiracy solidified around personal insult as much as politics. The tribune Cassius Dio, a veteran, was given the daily password by Caligula with obscene names like Venus or Priapus, mocking his voice. This humiliation made him a determined leader. Even his own family was not spared. His uncle Claudius was forced into servile acts and drained of money. The message was clear: no bond of blood would save you. The conspiracy now saw removing Caligula as the only way to save themselves and the state. Portents and omens taken seriously by Romans began to mount. At a public sacrifice, he was splattered with blood, an ill sign. The soothsayer warned him of great danger, but Caligula dismissed it, boasting of his own divinity. According to Cassius Dio, the night before his death, he dreamed he was in heaven, and Jupiter kicked him back to earth. He told his wife of the dream. Even in his own subconscious, the god he impersonated was rejecting him. On the fateful morning, he complained of indigestion and considered staying in his palace. But his entourage, some of whom were conspirators, persuaded him to attend the games being held in the palace precincts. The trap was set. As he left, he passed a troupe of young actors from Asia he was fond of. He stopped to watch and encourage them, spending precious minutes. This delay allowed the conspirators in the theater to grow nervous, thinking their plot was discovered. The final straw was a planned humiliation. Caligula announced he would leave Rome and rule from Alexandria in Egypt, like a Hellenistic god-king. This spurred the disparate plotters to action. The leaders were Cassius Dio, a tribune Caligula mocked for his effeminate voice, and Cornelius Sabinus. The conspirators chose their spot, a secluded underground passage Caligula would use to return to the palace for lunch. It was narrow, offering no escape. They positioned themselves, their hearts pounding, waiting for the sound of his footsteps. To protect potential allies and ensure no one of stature could be accused of being part of the attack, the conspirators subtly led key figures like Claudius away on false errands just before the ambush. The moment arrived. As Caligula paused to speak to the young dancers, he presented his back. Cassius Dio stepped forward, cried out, and struck the first tremendous blow to the neck. The attack was on. His loyal Germanic guards reacted with fury, killing some conspirators. But they were too few. The plot was successful. Gaius Julius Caesar Germanicus, Emperor Caligula, aged 28, was dead. The reign of terror was over. As he left a theater performance during the Palatine Games, the conspirators struck in a secluded corridor. Cassius Dio gave the first cut. According to Josephus, they stabbed him 30 times. The emperor, who had declared himself a god, died like any mortal man, bleeding out on the marble floor. The conspiracy had only targeted Caligula, but in the power vacuum, other factions acted. Loyal German bodyguards went on a rampage, killing innocent senators. Meanwhile, a Praetorian soldier murdered Caligula's wife, Caesonia, and then dashed the brains of their infant daughter, Julia Drusilla, against a wall. The Julio-Claudian line was nearly extinguished. The palace was looted. The statues of the god emperor were torn down. The Senate, in a moment of desperate hope, briefly debated restoring the Republic, but real power lay with the Praetorian Guard. While searching the palace, soldiers found Caligula's uncle, Claudius. He was 50, bookish, afflicted with a stammer and limp, and had been a figure of ridicule for decades. He was hiding, fearing execution as another member of the family. In a moment of brutal pragmatism, the guards saw their opportunity. Claudius was a legitimate heir of Augustus. They could install him as emperor and demand a massive cash reward for their loyalty. The Senate's dream of a republic died that morning. Faced with the armed Praetorians and Claudius's promise of amnesty, the Senate capitulated. They confirmed Claudius as emperor. The conspirators who killed a tyrant were themselves executed within days. The system had survived the man. The Senate passed a damnatio memoriae, condemning his memory. His statues were destroyed, his name erased from monuments. The goal was to make the world forget he ever ruled. But some stories are too powerful to erase. Our primary sources, Suetonius, Tacitus, Cassius Dio, wrote decades or even centuries later. They relied on senatorial archives and gossip. Their accounts are filled with salacious tales of incest, arbitrary cruelty, and insanity. They had reason to paint him as the ultimate monster. Modern scholarship is more nuanced. We ask, was he clinically insane, or was he a traumatized young man raised in a snake pit, given absolute power, and likely suffering from a physical illness that altered his brain? His actions, while extreme, follow a logic of theatrical terror meant to break the Senate's will. Caligula is the archetype of the mad tyrant. But his story is also a case study in the corrupting nature of absolute power, the fragility of the human mind, and how history is written by the winners. He was a product of the very system that later vilified him. In the end, Caligula's reign was brief, just 3 years, 10 months, a violent blip in Rome's long history. But his legend endures as the ultimate warning of what can happen when a damaged person is granted the power of a god and a state forgets how to say no. So what do you think? Was Caligula a psychopathic monster, a victim of illness and circumstance, or simply the logical extreme of the imperial system Rome created? If you want to explore more stories of power, madness, and history, make sure you're subscribed and the notification bell is on. The Roman Empire is full of them. Debate his legacy in the comments. We read them all. And if you'd like to dive deeper, check out the books in the description. Give this video a like if you enjoyed this deep dive into history's darkness. Rome survived Caligula, it would survive worse. These stones witnessed it all. They remind us that power is temporary, but the stories last forever. Thanks for watching. Until next time.